Isn't it amazing how God can use the people we might overlook or people we don't hold in especially high regard to teach us some profound life lessons? In 1 Corinthians 1:27 says that God chose the foolish things of the world so he might put to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world so he might put to shame the strong. And we see this at work in a really fascinating story in Jeremiah 35. In Jeremiah 35, God tells Jeremiah to do something unexpected. He says, go to the Rechabites, invite them into the temple, and offer them wine to drink. Now, that might not seem like much, but there's a reason behind it. God's about to make a point, not just to Jeremiah, but to all of Judah. The Rechabites were not the kind of people you'd expect to find in the temple courts. They were nomads, tent dwellers. They were a small, humble tribe who kept to themselves. They weren't priests. They weren't rulers or religious leaders. They didn't have the Torah or the status that Judah's leaders claimed. They were outsiders. And yet when Jeremiah invited them in and offered them wine, as it was customary, their answer was simple and resolute. They said, no, we can't. Our ancestor, Jonadab, commanded us to live a certain way, to avoid wine, to live in tents, to stay set apart. And we've stayed true to that for generations. Now, this wasn't about the righteousness of living in tents versus living in structures, or the righteousness of drinking wine versus not drinking wine. This was a living demonstration of people with an unshakable commitment and follow-through. For 250 years, this family had been living out their commitment. They didn't waver. They didn't make excuses. Even when they were brought into the grand temple courts, surrounded by wealth and power and religion, they stayed faithful to the calling they had received. And here's the thing. God had orchestrated this whole moment to make a point. After the Rechabites refused the wine, the Lord said to Jeremiah, do you see this? These outsiders, these simple nomads, have obeyed the command of their ancestor for centuries, but my own people, Judah, who have my covenant, my Torah, my prophets, they won't listen to me, the creator of heaven and earth, the one who rescued them, set them apart, called them my own. They won't obey my voice. It's a shocking contrast. The people who looked the part, the priests, the kings, the religious leaders, they were unfaithful. They broke their promises, turned away from God, lived for their own convenience. But the ones you wouldn't expect, the Rechabites, were the ones who lived with integrity and faithfulness. It's a story that forces us to pause and ask, who are the people we might overlook or underestimate, thinking they have nothing to teach us? Maybe people who don't dress in the best clothes or have the look we expect the faithful to have. Maybe it's a quiet coworker who lives with unshakable integrity, or the neighbor who serves others without fanfare, or the friend who holds to their values no matter the cost. God often uses the people we least expect to challenge us and inspire us. And then there's the harder question. Are we more like Judah's leaders or the Rechabites? Are we putting on a show of faithfulness, saying the right things but failing to live them out? Or are we quietly and consistently walking in obedience, even when it's hard, even when no one notices? Here's the truth. God isn't impressed by appearances. He's looking for hearts that are willing to listen and obey. And sometimes he puts unexpected people in our path to remind us what that looks like. So today, reflect and ask yourself, am I living faithfully or am I just looking the part? And commit today to be faithful in the small things, just like the Rechabites, knowing that God sees and honors your obedience.